Some people believe the 21st century is really dangerous. So my question to you is, what should the world do about 21st century conflicts?
It's a great question. It's just a big question. So I want to share a couple of statistics with you, because then the truth often starts with the numbers. It's never in the numbers, but it can start there. The United States currently spends more on defense than all other parts of our discretionary federal budget combined. We spend more on defense than the rest of the world combined. Every other country in the world, if you add up their defense budgets, it's lower than our defense budget. We spend 22% of our federal budget, our total federal budget, on defense. So let's compare that with some of our allies. Germany spends 2.5% of its total budget on defense. England spends 4%. France, 3.5%. And then you say, well, okay, but those guys are all riding on our coattails because they know we'll do the heavy lifting, right? Like we're doing in Iraq. Okay, so let's look at some of our adversaries. Iran, 7%. China, somewhere between 11 and 16%. The biggest second, by the way. And has a much smaller budget than ours. So you start to look at this picture and you have to ask yourself what degree of threat we really face before you start to get into too much of an alarmed mode. And the reason for that is, again, to take our cue from Eisenhower. Eisenhower was the steward of our national security at the dawn and burgeoning infancy of the Cold War. And facing the real threat of nuclear destruction from the Soviet Union, he was advocating restraint and disarmament. And today, policy thinkers in Washington, facing a ragtag, amorphous threat from people hiding in caves and training in dusty deserts with no access to nuclear weapons and no such things trained on our homeland, are advocating ever-increasing budgets and an unlimited commitment to the defense apparatus. And what I think Eisenhower understood that we're failing to understand today at the policy level is that national defense is ultimately about more than just bombs. That he understood, remember, that he built our highways out of national defense money. And he understood that an uneducated people is an undefended people, because who will run the machines of war? And that an unhealthy people is unfit for war. And that at the end of the day, most of all, if you let the dogs of corporatism loose in your society and you allow them to corrupt the culture of Washington and make Washington for sale, so that the people of New Orleans are forsaken by their government because the public good has been entrusted to private interests, then you will lose the last line of defense for the country after all, which is the willingness of its people to die for it, because they won't believe in it anymore.